A24 has a collection of zines that they do where they pick an auteur or artist and have them curate an entire edition that's then sold on their website. And as far as I know, I don't see any videos going over the recent Kane Pixels edition, and I think somebody should. It should be out there. So let's talk about it. So the Sadfi brothers did an edition when Uncut Gems came out about interviewing people who were involved in the gem industry in a comic. And whenever Bo Burnham did his, it was all about internet culture, because of course he's internet famous first, and because this whole thing inside was related to our connections to each other through the internet. Yeah, remember when Bo Burnham was being treated like a demigod because he made a piece of art that all of us were really hungry for because no art was coming out, and it was just him like singing songs about the internet, but we were all treating him like fucking Shakespeare? Yeah. Good thing. It's a good video, but I don't know, people are weird. Back to Kane Pixels and back to the Backrooms though. Kane Pixels is unique in the lineup of A24 zines because he didn't, commission any interviews. He didn't put a bunch of comics and art in there. He didn't necessarily curate a huge lineup of content. The entire zine is just an introduction from him that's a few paragraphs, and then a reprinting of a turn-of-the-century short story named The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Some of you might remember it from high school. Some of you might remember it from being referenced in other media. But let's talk about why Kane picked this for his zine and what it can tell us about the Backrooms movie. The Yellow Wallpaper was originally published in 1892, the late Victorian era, and it goes into a nameless woman who is being confined by her physician husband in an upstairs bedroom with a bizarre yellow wallpaper that she can't stand, but her husband is making her stay up there in this yellow wallpaper room with bars on the window and blocking the door to go downstairs because he's a physician and he claims that this is going to help her with her postpartum depression. And she's not up there with the baby. The baby is downstairs. We hear about him from the narrator, but it's mostly her experiences as she's losing her mind in this room because of the wallpaper. Or was it something in her all along that the wallpaper just brought out? The Yellow Wallpaper was inspired by a real resting treatment that Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the author, had to go through, and that led to her having a lot of emotional turmoil and a lot of stress. It required women to lay in bed for long stretches of time, weeks throughout the postpartum depression. So you're going through this mental illness, but you're not allowed to move or do anything, which, if you know anything about how we treat depression now, is antithetical to common, true medical knowledge that tells you like a depressed person needs to be involved with things, they need to keep going. But Charlotte Perkins Gilman even then had a sense that this was antithetical to a post-pregnancy woman's, well-being. The Yellow Wallpaper will immediately remind you of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, I'm sure, was an inspiration for Charlotte Perkins Gilman with this story. If not, then it must have been some kind of unconscious influence, because he had been popular in writing for decades by the time Perkins Gilman had written the story. And it shows. The horror is not a giant Frankenstein monster or something cosmic and grand and sublime, as we would see in British Gothic stories like Frankenstein or Dracula. There is no outer entity in American Gothic horror. Horror is of the mind. Even in a later writer like H.P. Lovecraft, the mind is still center when dealing with the horrors of these terrible cosmic beings coming from nowhere, everywhere, all at once. Isn't it fascinating that the United States, as a country built from the minds of men rather than pure blood and soil connection, has produced so much horror that is of the mind and is a person being revolted by the creations of their own mind and their own insanity. Now, this isn't like pure metaphysical representation of America. The United States also came with the rise of science and medicine, and so of course our horrors became less about the spooky ghosts that are out there and reflected what we now know about the horrors of reality and mental illness. And Charlotte Perkins Gilman, her story is a perfect reflection of that, just as much as Edgar Allan Poe. Also remember that the Yellow Wallpaper was written in that late Victorian period when mass manufacturing was starting to become a common part of Western life, arts, and culture. There used to be just one painting, there it is, and then you go to that one place if you want to see the painting and see what it looks like. And unless you're there in front of it, you can't see it again. But the 1890s and the turn into the 20th century saw recreations of furniture that you could see in multiple houses. The invention of photography then changes that. There can be a photograph of a painting. A photograph can be a painting in and of itself. Mass factory reproduction allows us to have several versions of a painting in several different houses. The time that gave us this short story that talks about the insanity of staring at the same thing again and again, then gave us the technology and skills to create this thing that triggered a woman's mass psychosis on a grander scale for hundreds, thousands of people. Kane Pixels, by making this short story the official zine of the Backrooms, is fully admitting that he wants the Backrooms to be in this same psychological American Gothic tradition. The fear of the mind, the fear of what it projects onto the world repeated around us, again and again and again. American Gothic. If you need further proof of this, read the last line to Kane Pixels' introduction to the short story, which reads, "We are, as a species, parsing wallpaper at extraordinary scale." The Yellow Wallpaper ends with the narrator ripping that wallpaper that's drawn her into psychosis off the wall, and another woman walks in to find the narrator crawling in a circle in the room again and again and again. The woman that's found the narrator faints, falls on the ground, but that doesn't stop the narrator. The narrator keeps crawling in a circle, climbing over the fainted body again and again and again. It's interesting to note that in the 1890s, there was an entire movement in wallpaper design to make these pastoral landscapes that would remind people of their ancestors out in the field, enjoying themselves, pastoral life, and was meant to restore a kind of left-leaning, progressive sentiment. This was from the wallpaper designer William Morris, a favorite artist of mine. One more thing. My favorite detail about the Yellow Wallpaper zine is not in the short story itself, but in the art direction taken by Kane Pixels illustrating this story. The one half of the design inspiration comes from the glitched out, dithered effects that one expects from ARG found footage internet stories like the Backrooms or any creepypastas you can find online. The other combines that glitched out style with 19th century illustrations that could be found in books contemporary to Charlotte Perkins Gilman and the Yellow Wallpaper. That artistic direction is Kane Pixels warning you against any sort of pastoral nostalgia for any image, inside or out, again and again and again. If you don't heed his warning, you may end up trying to explain what a dog is to somebody who's never seen a dog before, or even worse, crawling in a circle on the floor like a dog yourself. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe.